Some extremely important developments in rhythmic notation occur in the second half of the 13th century. This would be the end of the Ars Antiqua. You might want to look at page 58 in my text. The first important person here, and this is the more important of the two, is Franco of Cologne. And to keep it simple, I just choose a round number, the middle of the century, 1250, for this development. So he came up with some ideas about how this notation of rhythm could be done. And you can see that there are two items listed there that are very important. The first one, specific note shape equals specific note length. Oh my goodness. Each note tells you by itself how long it is. You don't have to have a pattern which causes you to stick in a groove for a long time. Okay? You can change rhythms quickly, again and again and again. So while we can't look at this music and read the rhythm, it looks different. The philosophical approach that we use today started then. The idea that each note can tell you how long it is by itself. Now keep in mind, they still didn't have meter or measures, okay? But the important thing is each note can tell you how long it is by itself. It's going to add a lot of possibilities. The second item listed there also is important for adding possibilities, because up until now we've talked about a long note and a short note. And yes, we've seen a few little ornamental things added from time to time, but not much. So there's basically, not very many rhythmic values. So a hierarchy of values starts to create much more variety. Now, if any of you had an instrumental methods class or you learned an instrument early on in your book, you probably had some chart that kind of looked like this, okay? So this is what I mean by a hierarchy of values. You start at the top of this chart, go down one level. Oh, 2 of these equal 1 of those. Go down one more. Oh, 4 of these equal 1 of the top. 8 in the neck equal 1 of the top. 16 at the bottom equal 1 of the top, and so on. Okay? So we keep subdividing into further levels. Again, this isn't what it looked like back then. And that's duple division. But the idea that we have subsets of subsets of subsets, that's also going to really open up the possibility for rhythmic notation. We're going to look at a piece in the next video that uses this approach, and we'll talk about it a little bit more then. But this is the big landmark thing. It starts to create the possibility of much more variety in rhythm than rhythmic modes. All right? A few decades later, I just say maybe around 1280 or so, Petrus de Cruci comes along. And notice I've got two versions of his name. Sometimes these people, we refer to them in different languages. But Petrus de Cruci is how I will refer to him. So he builds on Franco's ideas. He doesn't make his landmark a change, but he does a few important things. And one of the most important is subdividing the very small notes much more than had been done before. And I read in different books exactly how far that went, so I don't know, which experts, why they don't agree, but somewhere between 4 and 7 or 9 subdivisions of a beat. Now you think about a couple of things here that are important. Number one, the number is bigger. But the other thing that's really interesting is look at some of those numbers. You could even have odd numbers, 8, odd numbers like 7 or 8, or 7 or 9. You have 8. You just have so many choices. Okay? So much more subdivision possible, and also some rather different kinds of numbers. The other item discussed there is this thing we call dots of division. Now, a dot after a note in music today, I'm sure that many of you know, adds length to it. That's not what this is, okay? Because they didn't have beamings and stems and things like that, in order to divide up the beats, if you had a lot of quick notes, you needed something to kind of show which ones were dividing up one beat and which ones were dividing up another beat. So this is sort of, again, my modern representation of this. I've never seen a string in a piece like this that had this many quick notes in a row, but you can see the main note values, and then you see I've added those little teeny dots. So that's how we separate one beat from another when you have a lot of quick notes. And you notice in this example I also chose a variety of subdivisions. Okay, so one of the things I talk about near the bottom of that section on Petrus de Cruci is that although this he doesn't philosophically argue against triple subdivision, he kind of begs the question, and it's going to be the next generation or two at the beginning of the Ars Nova that really start to argue, why do we need to have so much triple subdivision? Okay? But Petrus's style kind of leads us to that because you start having these unusual divisions. So as an example of that, I'd like to play just a little bit of a piece on page 128 in the anthology. This is not an assigned listening, but this is a piece written in this style. And look, you can see on the score some 3s, 5s, down in the third line, a 7. I'm going to go that far in my little short excerpt, but listen, you can see it in the score, and I think hopefully you can hear it at some spots where all of a sudden there's this flurry of subdivisions. So, it's not obvious on every beat, but sometimes occasionally like, wow, there must be something different there, either just learning by ear again, in this case, the notation. So, landmark changes, we're still going to have a lot of triple subdivision because they still had a philosophical emphasis on that. But we're going to start to have much more variety in our next piece because of the notational possibilities and getting away from rhythmic modes and having a more precise way of notating rhythm. And we will look at that and hear that in the next video.